what we'll talk about today is about staying healthy. We'll have about an hour to talk about health. I'm sure we all care about that. And we'll discuss health not necessarily as you'd expect to discuss that with your average physician. We won't talk about specific diseases or symptoms or treatments or where it hurts and aches and all that. We won't talk about health in a way that we talk with our friends or our close family members. Sometimes we discuss what our concerns are and how we try to navigate the maze of the healthcare system and the issues we have with healthcare providers and all that. What I'd like to talk about today is the science behind the psychological influences of health. And I'm very excited about the science because it is really cutting edge, and every week and every month for the past 10, 20 years, there's been new discoveries in this field. So a lot of the knowledge that I'll be presenting today comes from this year, from last year, from at the most the past 10 years. So staying healthy, well, we all want that, and it's not easy to be healthy. In fact, health is not very popular. About 60% of the population in Canada has a chronic disease. So, a lot of things can go wrong, and we end up not as healthy as we would like to. And you see, this is a slide with 3 boxes. If you see a slide with 3 boxes, it's complicated. If you see a slide with 1 box, it's simple. 2 is a bit less simple. 3 is complicated. So staying healthy is an outcome, is a process that is influenced by a lot of different things. We've got to have we've got to be lucky on the gene side. Some people are luckier than others. Gender is important for health. Some diseases are more gender-friendly, more female-friendly. Others are, they seem to hit men more than women. Age is important for health. I don't have to convince you about that. As well as immune system and a whole bunch of other factors, environmental exposures to different materials, etc. Another part that is very, very important for health has not very much to do with our biology, but a lot to do with our social environments. It's cultural beliefs. They seem to be very, very potent for our health. Just one example is how our perspectives on smoking have changed over the years, and what a big difference that has made. So that's a cultural change. Socioeconomic status, huge influence on health. We know that people from lower incomes suffer more than people from a higher socioeconomic status. Ethnic background is important. Some diseases are more prevalent in certain ethnic groups. So you see, it's not just the biology, it's not just the physiology, it's not just your immune system. A third group of potential factors that influence our health is our psychological environment. Health behaviors, those things are things such as smoking or physical exercise, diet. We all know how important those things are, and we'll talk a lot about them today. Personality seems to be important, and I'll give you some more information about that later. Our social environments are really important as well. Social interactions, how supportive our partners are, whether we're married, we're cohabitating, whether we're single, at which stage in our life, etc. All these things are very important for health. Adhering to our medication when we need to have them. That's a psychological variable, a factor that is very, very important for health. And this is what I'd like to concentrate on today in this talk in the next 60 minutes or so. So you see in the popular press, one of the things that has been talked about is happiness. This is an excerpt from the Globe and Mail just a few months ago. It says, history proves there's no happiness how-to guide. Something from the CBC News, happiness more than gene dip. This is something that we all talk about is happiness. And, we all want to be happy. probably didn't really need that kind of research, but a huge project that happened in 41 nations, we discovered that almost all people rate happiness as important or extremely important. Well, we might wonder if that's really true. Well, it is really true, and it applies across a lot of different cultures. People want to be happy. Okay, so we feel the happiness. We know when we're happy. We know when we're less happy. But when we try to study that, how do we study that? So what scientists did is they went around the world and they asked people, thousands of people, what is happiness for you? How do you experience happiness? And after they've gotten a whole bunch of answers to this question from a whole lot of different cultures, they came to these few kind of areas of questions. One is about satisfaction with life. So you're happy when you're satisfied with your life, when you think that in most ways my life is close to my ideal. So far I've gotten the most important things in life, or if I could leave my life over, I would change almost nothing. And it's not like a black or white, it's a yes or no answer, but there is a rating on these questions. And that's how people experience happiness when they're satisfied with their life. Another part of happiness is more emotional. It's about whether you feel good. And that's called pleasant affect. And it's not just the presence of a positive, but it's also the absence of a negative that defines partly happiness. And that's what people also use, although mostly they do concentrate on the positive. Another aspect of happiness is a sense of well-being. For example, if you ask people, well, if you look at your past and you think about the future, how do you feel? And some people might say, well, I feel just terrible about that. Or some people might say, I feel, well, it's kind of delighted. I'm happy about that. I have good feelings about it. And of course, people ask, scientists would ask people, how do you feel happy? And people will give usually an honest answer to that. So this is kind of a way that happiness is being studied. And again, is based on the answers of a lot of different people around the world. So what do we know about happy people? We know that happiness leads to success. Well, I don't know if Bill Clinton is happy, but in this picture, he looks pretty happy. And he's pretty successful, I would say. So what do we know from research? We know that happier people are more likely to graduate from college, more likely to secure a job, to receive good evaluations from their supervisor at work, and more likely to find their job meaningful. All good things. They're also less likely to lose their job, and when they do, they're more likely to get another job quicker. And they're also more likely to earn a higher income. That's nice for happy people. Happiness also leads to better social relationships. Now, happier people are more likely to get married, to remain married, and to be happily married. And they're more interested in social interactions, and they smile more when they talk to other people. Happier people are more likely to volunteer. In fact, happier people get better treatments in all sorts of different areas of life, and that's because they're more likable. People like happier people, and they like to be around them, and they have good interactions with them. Now, okay, that's good. Success, social interactions, marriage. But are happier people healthier? That's a big question. Now, it's a hard question to answer because when you look at the literature about health, you find 20 times more studies on the relationship between depression and health. And so we are very interested in the negative, and the positive gets less attention. However, this is changing, and research interest in the health effects of happiness is on the rise. There's more and more studies coming up, and I will be talking about the results of those studies in this presentation. So research on happiness and health looks at mortality, that is, how long we live, as well as morbidities, whether we get sick. in healthy populations. It also looks at the effect of happiness on people who are already sick and whether how long they survive the illness that they are suffering from. We also have reports of symptoms and pain, aches and headaches and back pain and these kinds of things that bother us all, both healthy and sick populations. What do we find out? There's been now probably about 70 excellent studies in this area. I'm discarding probably about just as many not excellent studies. But based on these really, really good studies, we know now that happiness reduces mortality in healthy populations. It reduces risk for cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and diabetes in healthy people. It reduces mortality risk in the chronically ill, for example, in people who have end-stage renal failure or HIV/AIDS. And also decreases mobility limitations in later life. Now, happier people really have it better in terms of health. These are big things, okay? And how is this knowledge accumulated? Well, what the scientists do is they take thousands of people or hundreds of people, and what do? They ask them questions about their happiness, and then they wait, and they wait, and they wait till something happens, till somebody gets sick or somebody dies. Eventually, we all do. And that's how they find out whether happiness leads to these outcomes. Of course, it's not just happiness that leads to all these things. So what do? We look at all these other known risk factors for mortality and morbidity, such as general level of health or age or other demographic factors such as socioeconomic status, risk factors such as healthy lifestyles, smoking, things like that. Anxiety or depression, these are also very known risk factors for morbidity and mortality. So after accounting for all those things, we will still see a very strong effect of happiness on both longevity and morbidity. I'll just give you one example of a study because it's a nice Canadian study and comes from Nova Scotia. Is anybody here from Nova Scotia? Oh, one person! Oh my goodness! Yeah, so this is a very nice study, just published last year, in fact. And what the researchers did is they took 1,700 people and they followed them up. They went to these people in 1995, and they took a whole bunch of measurements for their health, and they also asked them about their happiness. And then 10 years later, they went and collected the hospital records for these people to see who had a cardiovascular disease in the meantime, this past 15 years. And sure enough, there were 145 incidents of cardiovascular disease, about 8% of that population. That's kind of normal. And the rate of incidence of cardiovascular disease was much lower for those who were happier. In fact, there was 22% lower for every inch of happiness increase. So it's kind of a sliding scale. The happier you are, the less likely to develop a cardiovascular illness. Now you'll say, come on, how is this possible? I mean, seriously, happiness is something we feel. Cardiovascular disease is something the doctor diagnoses. Like, that's not possible. Something we feel happens to, increase our risks for certain illnesses, makes us live less long. That's not possible. Well, that's what people thought until about 10 or 15 years ago. That was really what everybody thought. But our thinking about these things has changed dramatically, and it keeps changing because we're discovering things all the time. Well, what happens is feelings, thoughts happen around here, this part of our body. It's in the brain. Of course, they spread everywhere else afterwards, but they are mostly concentrated in the brain. We feel things, we think, we have thoughts around here. And a lot of the illness happens elsewhere, happens in our bodies, gets diagnosed there, and gets treated there. Now, what scientists have done is They thought, well, that has no connection to that. But that's not true. What we've discovered the past 10 years is that there is an enormous connection between our thoughts and our body, and that goes through our immune system. It turns out our brain talks to our immune system, and our immune system talks to our brain all the time. And that's now an established connection, but it wasn't about 10 years ago, so it really is something very new that we're very excited about. And it really explains how a lot of our thoughts and feelings get translated into illness, because our immune system is so critical for our defense against all sorts of things, all sorts of pathogens. And it also is implicated in inflammation and fighting infection. And cardiovascular disease is very much inflammation-based, as well as autoimmune diseases. And those are big, big killers in our society. So what we're finding out is that there is a very good connection between our brain and our immune system. And I'm not going to give you a lot of details about this, but I just wanted to show you this so that you'll have a sense that those effects you see in morbidity and mortality, they happen and they are there and they're visible and they're actually testable, and people have tested them. I'll show you some studies. So how does happiness affect our body? Well, what we know from our research is that happier people have a healthier cardiac control, because they have increased heart rate variability and decreased blood pressure. Those are very, very good things to have. Also, when you put happier people in a stressful situation, they don't react as bad as abruptly as people who are less happy. And that shows in their cardiovascular system as well. So the blood pressure doesn't go as high. And okay, if you only get upset about one time every 10 years, well, okay, that's not going to affect anybody. But think about how many times you get stressed or upset every day. You're driving, somebody cuts in front of you, or you walk into the bus and somebody doesn't get up, and you look like you really need a seat. These things, and so you have those things happening, several times a day over periods of years and years and years. And it turns out, if you're generally a happier person, you'll get upset, but you won't get very upset. If you're less happy, you're more likely to see things a bit more severe, and they are a bit more upsetting. And so what that does in your body, it basically raises a lot of cardiovascular systems. It raises your blood pressure. It does a lot of things, but this is one of the things that it does. What it also does is that happiness lowers your cortisol. Now, you may have heard about cortisol. Sometimes you see things in the popular press about cortisol. It's called the stress hormone. And it really is one of the stress hormones, very important, and is implicated through that system that I told you about. This combination of brain and immune system is implicated in a lot of different diseases, such as cardiovascular disease and autoimmune diseases and hypertension. Because cortisol compromises our immune system, it dampens down its function. So when we have a lot of cortisol in our blood, we are not able to fight a lot of attacks from different pathogens that enter our body all the time. So we're more vulnerable to infection. And as I said, if that only happens once every 10 years, it doesn't really matter. But it actually happens many times a day and several times a week. And over the years, it really adds up. And so if you're happier, you actually have lower cortisol, which means your immune system is a much better fighter and can really help you deal with a lot of problems in life. So I'll give you just one example of how these things are studied. So I give you like a, backstage kind of view of this kind of research and knowledge. So in this particular study, we had 4,600 people that participated. This is a study by Andrew Steptoe, who's a leader, actually, one of the leading scientists in this area. It was men and women between 50 and 70 years old. And what he did is he had everybody have a physical examination. This is about 4,500 people. That's a big sample. Also information about their socioeconomic status, their smoking status, health behaviors, diet, physical activity, all these kinds of things, demographic information, and then asked these people to gave them these kind of swabs. These are called salivettes. And they had to chew one of those and wet it with saliva about 6 times a day. And also give ratings of their happiness about 6 times a day. So it wasn't just, sometimes something happens, you don't feel that happy. But, a few hours later, you give another rating, and 6 through the day, it gives a better sense of, how happy you are. What did you find? You found that less happy adults had, in fact, 7% higher cortisol than happier adults. That's a big difference, by the way. In the same study, he also looked at chronic inflammation. Now, chronic inflammation is really important because it really compromises your body, and it really makes it vulnerable to a lot of different diseases, like cardiovascular disease. And one of the markers of inflammation is this little molecule. It's a cytokine. Is a molecule that attacks pathogens as they enter the body. And when you find a lot of those, it means you have a lot of inflammation. So, in fact, less happy people had 70% higher. They were 70%. This particular cytokine was 70% higher in the group with lower happiness ratings. So it means that as the stress response of these people was higher, and the cortisol was reducing their ability to fight the responses, they were more attacked by pathogens that they were not able to fight very effectively. So they had more inflammation in the body. So people who are less happy just have more inflammation. And that really makes them susceptible to cardiovascular illness and autoimmune diseases. This is a really cool set of studies. This guy, Sheldon Cohen, I don't know how he did it, but he convinced a whole bunch of people to come into his lab. Well, it's like a whole apartment building. And to give them the cold virus, just a little, nasal spray, or the flu virus. These are volunteers. They get paid, but not very much. They did suffer. They got the cold virus right there, in their nose. And they were quarantined for 6 days. Like they had to stay there for 6 days so that they get measured every day whether they get sick or how much mucus they had or the temperature, all sorts of things by medical doctors. What did he find? He found that happier people had lower risk of developing a cold or a flu. They also had, those who did get sick, they had fewer symptoms. So what it means is that, if you happen to be lucky and be very happy, and then you suffer less from colds and flus, and when you do get them, because sometimes we do get them, you're going to recover much quicker from them. So that's really nice, and that's an experiment. I mean, it's not possible that colds produce happiness. It's just not possible. So, in addition to those physiological effects of happiness, happiness seems to have a good effect on our lifestyle. It turns out happier people take better care of themselves. They are less likely to smoke. They are more physically active. They consume less alcohol. They sleep better. They take their medications when they have to, appropriately. They use sun protection, and they eat more fruit and less fat. The angels, I don't know. So, and that's really important. That's really important. That really is kind of a segue to the next section of my talk, which has to do with health behaviors and all those things that we know that we do or we don't do, and our bad habits that we love, but we know we shouldn't. So, what I'd like to talk about in the next 10 minutes is all the things that we know we need to do and why we don't do them. So we know what we need to eat healthily, or we know we need to exercise. This is me, by the way. So before I had a child, I could still do those things. going up in the mountains. We know we need to eat healthily and among friends and family and not in front of the TV. We also know what we shouldn't do. Some of these, they don't look so inviting here, do they? But it works out differently. And this fellow here feels, I think, very similarly to what we feel. And I'd like you to hear this, listen to this video just for a couple minutes, if it works.
I'm fine now, I think. I don't know. So they sent me to my regular doctor for a follow-up, and I was nervous going because my cholesterol, I knew it was going to be high because last year it was high, and I hadn't done anything different. What are the odds your cholesterol is going to plummet for no reason? Come on, 200, come on! 337, how can that be? I had Burger King coupons in my pocket. It's inexplicable. So I was nervous. And I realized that's the only time as an adult that I feel like a little kid, is when I go to the doctor. You didn't do what I told you, did you? No, I didn't. What should you have done? I should have listened when you were talking to me. What are you going to do from now on? Pay attention when you say things. When are you going to start? I'm going to start right now. Immediately. Call doctor. He's a good doctor, I think, you know. I told him I get heartburn sometimes, so he goes and gets me a list of things that cause heartburn. I'm looking at the list and I'm like, I already know this. I know how to get it.
So, it's true we know what to do. We just don't do it. It's not information we need, you know. Sometimes we do need that, but mostly it's trying to figure out how we're going to do this, how we're going to change our life and be more physically active, eat better, and be more with friends and family and spend time doing good things. And it's been the topic of health psychology for the past 40 years. And what we're trying to find out is we're trying to find out the factors that influence our decisions to have a healthy lifestyle, such as to keep going for that half-hour walk every evening, even though your favorite show maybe now is 7 o'clock, so there's some kind of competition there. Or, you know, what really pushes us to eat all the last 5 cookies in the jar? You know you shouldn't do it, but you want to do it. Or skip medication. That's another important thing. Or drive 100 kilometers per hour over the speed limit. These are decisions, health-related decisions, that we make every single day. And so we're trying to find out what it is that makes people make these decisions or not. And it turns out there's at least 2 things that can go wrong in this process. One of it is that sometimes it's hard to get motivated to take action. Okay? This fellow here says, oh, honestly, dear, I'm just giving my pedometer a rest. It's just hard to get motivated. You know, I know I should be going for this walk, but it's hard to motivate yourself. Okay, let's say that you've motivated yourself. Okay. Next thing that can go wrong is it's just hard to maintain that commitment. Okay, you've gone on Monday, you've gone on Tuesday. Wednesday it's raining a lot. You're hoping Thursday might be better weather. Friday comes, oh well, I'll start again on Monday. You know, that commitment is really hard to maintain. So this is, we're trying to find out what are those things that really influence us, our decision to stick it out. So research likes to make things small. We study things that are very small. We've got big questions and we cut them into little small pieces so that we can study each one of them. And then after 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years, and after a few hundred people have worked on that, then we put it all together and we make a story out of it. But it really is about cutting little questions in little small pieces that are testable. So what we know from this research is that when we try to make a decision, a health-related decision, we first create an intention to act, like what we talked about, a motivation to act. And we try to find all the good reasons to do what we want to do, like go for a walk or not eat the cookies. First, we kind of we think a lot about those things. And then it's the maintenance part. Once you start doing it, then it's the next phase, which is try to be committed and try to maintain it. So we go from a lot of the thinking to the acting. It turns out that when we try to get motivated, what we do is we consider the implications of our actions. Then we usually have kind of a rational process, like what do I want to change, how am I going to do it? Then we consider different options. How am I going to, if I want to increase my physical activity, how am I going to do that? Am I going to go for a walk? Am I going to go to the gym? Am I going to go for a small hike? What am I going to do? How am I going to achieve that? Just going up and down the stairs whenever I have the opportunity, all of the above. We just kind of consider our options. We also evaluate the consequences. And we try to come to some decision about how to act. And it turns out that decision is reflected in our intention. There's 3 different factors that influences our decision to get motivated. One is our attitude, the second one is social pressure, and the third one is our perceived ability. Not objective ability, but obviously what we think we're able to do. Attitudes, what is that? So these are positive and negative evaluations of taking action. So what is my attitude towards going for a walk every day? Or beliefs about the consequences of taking that action. What is that going to achieve for me? And the importance of those consequences. For example, if you want to regulate your weight a little bit better, then you might think, well, I believe that reducing fat in my diet will lead to weight loss and make me healthier and more attractive. That's something that people try to think through when they're trying to make a decision and motivate themselves to do something. The second thing that seems to be very important is beliefs about whether other people, significant others, think that we should be doing that. We should be going for a walk, or we should be regulating our weight a little bit better. And our motivation to comply with these people. So in the case of the weight regulation, you might think, well, okay, I'm going to try to reduce fat in my diet, but my family likes full-fat foods. And how's that going to work out? So it's very important to know, in our decisions to change, we really take into account what other people think. It's very, very important. I found this in the Globe and Mail just a few months ago. There's a young lady that says, my mother criticizes my weight every time I see her. Well, that's a big message for weight regulation from a mother to a child. The third group of factors that seems to make a big difference in our decision to get motivated is how difficult we think it's going to be, how easy we think it's going to be. Do we have time? Do we have opportunity? Do we need money for this? Do we have it? How confident are we that we're going to be able to do this? And do we have any control over it? Like I might say I might want to go for a hike every weekend, but I don't have a car. So I might be dependent on somebody else taking me there. So I don't have a lot of control over that. So if that's my strategy to increase my physical activity, there's a problem here. In the example that I have about weight regulation is like, do I have to cook every day? Will the food taste good when it's low fat? Will I have to spend all my money buying groceries at fancy stores? Things like that. All these things are thoughts that go through our minds when we're trying to make a decision. And we need all of them to really be in place so that we get motivated to change. Well, where is that change coming from? Where is the initial idea coming from? It turns out research shows that it's very important to know where it's coming from. Is it coming from your doctor? Is it coming because you feel embarrassed not to do certain things? Is it because we'd be disappointed by the partner will be disappointed? Or is it really that you want to do something because you recognize the benefits for yourself, or that it's something very enjoyable, or that you really get a sense of achievement? Now, these are two different groups of reasons why you want to make a decision, take action to improve your lifestyle. And it turns out, if you have intrinsic reasons, is it because you think it's beneficial for yourself, or it's enjoyable, or it's personally important, then you're more likely to have positive attitudes, and you're more likely to feel confident about changing. If you think you should go for walks because your partner tells you so, or your doctor tells you so, but you don't really find that all that enjoyable, then you're less likely to find it that it's as useful thing to do, or you're going to start finding reasons about your ability to do it, etc. So it's not very motivating to have extrinsic reasons to change. Okay, let's assume that we're all very motivated. We found all the good things that we need to do. We have all the opportunity. We have the control. We really think it's going to work out. Well, it turns out only about half the people who have all the good intentions end up doing what they set out to do. So what gets in the way of these well-informed intentions? First thing that gets in the way is personality. It turns out that if you're not very conscientious, your intentions don't get translated into action. If you are, you're more likely to be committed, especially in the face of obstacles and pretty much daily life. Another thing that has to be in place for your intentions to be translated into action is a lot of other things that could be happening in your life, a lot of other goals, a lot of other life goals that you might be having. So, for example, let's say I met a nice fellow and I'm just very much in love, and I also want to lose weight. But this guy really loves cooking. How am I going to do that? So I had a lot of intention to regulate my weight. Maybe I'm already losing weight. But then I find this nice gentleman who likes to cook all these beautiful and nice meals. And that's a problem. That really gets in the way of sustaining my intentions. It can also work to our favor. Sometimes we start working on a certain change in our life, and other things happen that really help it. And like, for example, you want to quit smoking, and your partner says, oh, yes, I'd like to quit smoking too. And there's a little video that describes somewhat a situation like that.
My parents finally quit smoking, and they have smoked since the 1800s. Let me tell you, Cools and Kent's chain smoking. And my mom wasn't going to quit. She's 63 years old. She was just going to smoke it out and see what happened. She was in for the long haul. And my dad's like, no, we have to quit. It's been 2 years since I've had a cigarette. But with my mom, I've never seen anyone so unhappy with a healthy choice. Like, she should do ads for the tobacco companies. Every time he leaves the room, as soon as he dies, I'm like, a damn cigarette. I'm not saying I don't love him, but I am looking forward to having a cigarette. I can certainly tell you that.
So in this case, it worked out well for her mom, because she did manage to quit smoking, and she also placed her partner. So she had two goals in life, and she was able to achieve both of them. So it can work out to our benefit to have multiple goals that have a nice synergy and really help us do things. And we find out in research, this is actually research that was published just last year. The researchers, what they did is they asked 144 people to write down their most important goals that they were going to pursue in the next 3 months. These were things that, things that you choose to do or things that you have to do. There may be things you're working towards, so things that you're trying to avoid, related to any aspect of your life, your work, your home, your leisure, your community, basically things that you're planning to do the next 3 months. And then they asked them, to what extent do you think each of these goals helps or conflicts with your participation in regular physical activity? So people might say things like, I want to take a course as a view, but I also want to start a good physical activity routine. So then ask, well, how do you think this course is going to interfere with your goal of your physical activity routine? And what they found 8 weeks later is they asked the same individuals, so how often have you participated in physical activity? For at least 30 minutes per session in the last week. And what they found is that about only 30% of the people who said they intended to exercise actually did so. And what made a big difference in that gap between intention and actual action is whether they had goals that actually facilitated their physical activity. So, for example, in the example of the SFU course, you say, oh, well, actually, this is really good because this course is about health psychology. And we'll talk a lot about healthy behaviors and how we need to maintain a healthy lifestyle. So this is actually going to help me maintain my physical activity because, it'll be on my radar and I'll be thinking about it and I'll learn a lot of strategies and things like that. So, things can kind of become synergistically beneficial. So why are goals so important? How can they have such a big effect? Well, they're based on our capacity to envision the future. They also drive and energize our behavior. And they also help us to organize our resources around pursuing and achieving them. And goals are pretty much what you see in this little fellow on the right. These are kind of like the carrot that kind of drives a lot of our behavior. It's things that we want to achieve that are generated within ourselves and that we just want to achieve them in life. Goals also exist in our brains. This is a result of an fMRI study that was done this past year and looked at where goals are located in our brains by asking people to imagine future events that were related to their goals and future events that were not. And it turns out there's different places where these things are. And there's other studies that show where our envisioning of our future and our future goals actually are located in our brain. So it's pretty much a physical thing, goals. And the opportunity to pursue important life goals seems to have an impact on physical health and our mental health in a variety of populations, as you see here. Workers, residents, patients suffering from myocardial infarction. And what we did in those studies is that we asked, to what extent are you able to achieve the following, like personal growth or physical well-being, social relationships, or self-confidence? And people who felt they had the opportunity in their life to pursue those goals had more satisfaction of their job, they had a better sense of accomplishment, they felt fewer pains and aches and physical symptoms, and they also had lower exhaustion. In another study that my colleague Christiane Hopman did a few years ago, she followed working adults through a period of a couple of weeks and measured to what extent they had the opportunity to pursue important things in their life. She also took saliva samples so that she could then measure their cortisol level. Remember cortisol and stress that we talked about earlier. So what she found is that on days when working adults could not pursue the goals, they had increased cortisol. It was a stressful experience for these people. So not being able to pursue your important goals seems to set off a physiological stress response. And over time, with chronic exposure, this can lead to serious health problems. Now, what makes us happy? And this is an order of importance. 50% of our happiness is hereditary. It means that this leaves another 50% that you can do something about, and that's a big amount. It turns out, and that's across a lot of different studies, a big source, the biggest and most important source of happiness, it's not, as you might think, winning the lottery. It's in fact having friends and family around. That's the biggest source of happiness for most people around the world. Second one is education and intelligence, less so physical attractiveness. And third, and really last by far, it is family income and material resources. In the long run, material resources, they make us happy, but friends or family make us happier. So why are material resources not important as a lot of people might think? Well, a lot of the research that looks at people over time and over decades, what we're finding out is that we basically adapt. We have the ability to adapt to whatever we want. And once we've adapted, then we want more. So it really does not get us anywhere to achieve material resources. You've probably seen this in the popular press as well. The second reason, there's research on the lottery winners, right? Lottery winners end up not being very happy, or they're just as happy as they were before, I think only a few months later. So a huge difference in their life, yet their sense of happiness pretty much remains stable over the long run and makes no difference, really, in their life. We also need more things than money to fulfill our important goals. Now, I don't know if you're going to agree with me. But I think you can't really buy real love. I also think you can't buy real friends. So, and these are very, very important things in life, love and friends. So you need more than money to be able to achieve those things in life. This is a study that was done a few years ago by Ed Dinner. Ed Dinner is really a leading scientist in this area of happiness and what leads to happiness. He followed 222 people, and he asked them to write down their most important goals. Then he also asked them, okay, please nominate 4 people that know you very well. He went to those 4 people and asked them, okay, this is 21 resources, it's called 21 things that people usually need to achieve their goals. Friends, relationships, successes, etc. And please tell us, for your friend, to what extent do you think these resources are going to help him or her achieve their most important goals? Well, it turns out these 4 other people, for all those 222 participants, they said that material resources and looks, money and looks basically, were not particularly important for either goals or happiness. Okay, you can say, if you ask me to write down my goals and write down what I think is going to help them, maybe there is some kind of bias. But if you ask somebody else to rate it, it's kind of a different story. Right? They're being a little bit different. They're going to give you maybe a different story than I would have given for myself. It also turns out that things such as self-confidence or having good relationships were more critical for both goals and happiness. That's as rated by important others. Another study that was published just a year ago by a German group followed 3,500 adults over a 15-year period and asked them to rate the importance of goals in life. Things such as success or family or having friendships or doing things for others, so altruistic goals. And then looked at their happiness 15 years later. So you write down your goals, and then 15 years later, well, actually, it was more times in the meantime, but let's say 15 years later, comes back and says, okay, let's see who's happy now. Okay? So those who initially said that their family goals and the altruistic goals were more important were, in fact, happier 15 years later than those who said that their success was the thing in life that they wanted to achieve. And this was particularly, actually success was particularly detrimental for women compared to men, but it was bad for men too. So the pursuit of happiness, and given its very big health effects, there are certain things that we know really matter for happiness. One is personality matters for happiness. So if you're an extroverted person, you're more likely to be happy. If you're an emotionally stable person, you're more likely to be happy. Now, if you also have an emotionally stable partner, then you're even happier. So it matters who you marry for your health. Pursuit of family and altruistic goals and not material goals are good remedies for happiness. Not being underworked or overworked is also a good idea for increasing your happiness score, and taking care of yourself, and motivating yourself to take some action to improve your health behaviors, your physical activity level, or your diet, and all these things, and also sticking to your decisions really helps you stay happy. Now I'm going to try to put a little bit together all the different things that we talked about the past hour. So, to stay healthy, now health is huge. Obviously, these are not the only things that matter for health. There's a lot of other issues, as I said in the beginning. But from this talk, and from the research that really has been accumulating for the past 20, 30 years, we know that happiness is good for health. To stay healthy, it's important to be able to be motivated to take action. We need to have the right thoughts to motivate yourself to do something about healthy eating or physical activity. Also maintaining commitment to those behaviors is really important, as well as having opportunities, creating opportunities or following opportunities in your life to achieve important life goals. And those goals, as we said, you get a better happiness boost if they are about friends and family, and if it's about helping other people, than it is to pursue a promotion or a career that is more prestigious and things like that. And those effects really take place through our very well established now connection between our thoughts and our immune system. And I have a few links here for people who are really keen on this topic and would like to watch some videos or look at some information on the web that you can learn more about happiness and stress and health and all that. That really concludes my talk. Thank you.